I'm not sure if people are into me just starting right away. To the facilitator of this space, uh, I'm not sure.
Uh,
Yes.
I think you can get started whenever you feels good for you.
Okay.
You're the last workshop for this night, not counting the open mic. So you don't have to like stop at a very specific time.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be really, really kind of brief and short. I want to bring a few things up into this conversation. Um, yeah, just regarding security, sort of security culture, protocol, and yeah. So I guess I can just introduce myself first of all. Oki Itamax Ganatani. I'm Edzi. Good day. Um, I Yeah. Initially, this workshop was supposed to be partnered with someone who had initially reached out to me to be part of this, and I guess I had found out that they had committed harm, sexual assault actually, and I had asked them to step back because um, I didn't think it was fair for if anyone that this person has harmed, in terms of like the harm being like machismo, sexism, uh, sexual assault. So I was like, it's really unfair for anyone who may have been harmed by you to not be able to come to this space because it's just kind of a huge patriarchal behavior is like a huge issue within communities that I've been organizing for the last decade. So a little bit about me is I identify as an anti-authoritarian organizer, community, like cultural worker, what have you. I'm on my father's side, I'm Afro-Indigenous, so also Blackfeet, and my mother's side of Filipinx, and yeah, I've been doing this kind of work for a while, and I think Security Culture 101 is just covering the basics of uh, how you can secure your team, your work, your organizing in a way that isn't just like kind of 9 to 5 or isn't just protocol. So in this slide, I have like, it says culture is greater than protocol, and I'll get into that a little bit. But I did want to just acknowledge that like um, me and this person that I was going to do this workshop with, we had other things that we weren't wanting to touch up on, but because of the nature of me telling this person not to be part of this anymore, I want to bring up the fact that like we can be worried about infiltration of white supremacists or of the police, but we also have to acknowledge and confront the kinds of harms in our own communities regarding like um, yeah, just patriarchal behavior. And yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that like, just because people aren't police or aren't agents of the state doesn't mean that they they can't create certain harms that might fracture and or make the space less safe. Um, so this yeah, I guess I just wanted to open up the space too for any of the people who are on this call to um, just like ask them like what is security culture and why do we need it. Um, if anyone knows or wants to take a jab at what security culture is and means. And why we would actually need it. Because I feel like I could talk this whole time, but it would be cool to have like some interactions with people. Like how would you make your effort secure? In regard to my my recent experience of telling my comrade that like they shouldn't come to this space because they have committed harm, and being worried that like other people would feel, you know, a kind of way about being taught by somebody who's committed harm. I was and it was an attempt on my part to make things secure for people to come here, so that if they knew this person, they wouldn't, you know, have to opt out because of their behavior. So that's an example of security culture. Does anyone else want to give?
Someone shared in the chat, we would need it because state repression is happening now, and has been happening for a while.
Okay.
I think also like security culture is really about like prioritizing like the most marginal of folks and like making sure they stay safe. So based off like what you're saying, like it definitely needs to be by like for like survivor centering. I feel like that's like definitely the fulcrum of it, and honestly doesn't get acknowledged enough in different organizing spaces. It needs to be reckoned with more in its totality. That like it honestly reminds me of what like Insight put out, which is like why misogynists make great informants, and like I think that's definitely part of like security culture is like safety for folks. So yeah, thank you for like uplifting that too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, because we had a whole thing we wanted to do on the histories of where security culture, and I can talk to that. I just like want to really center, especially right now, the voices and experiences of people who have experienced patriarchal behavior, patriarchal harm. It's really yeah, like it's got me really fucked up right now, considering that I didn't know that this person had this history, and I frankly wasn't considering doing this workshop, but I thought this conversation was important to have, especially for people who are trying to get involved in organizing work, possibly land defense things. Can I get like in the chat, is there a way I could get like a quick like like a thumbs up from people who already knew what security culture is, at least, like if people don't want to communicate right now. I actually don't have access to the chat. I feel so let's see.
I see a couple thumbs up.
Okay. So for people who do know what security culture is, I guess I want to, oops, I'm going to move this here. I just want to, oh, there's something going wrong with my Zoom. In any case, so security culture is a set of practices, customs, and principles necessary to build secure communities of resistance, helps reduce risk, targeting and incarceration, can keep your people safe. I guess I want to just talk on how when I think about security culture and how I practice it in the past, it's almost really tied to ego in so many ways. So many people want to, especially nowadays, with the internet and social media being something that can really bolster your platform or your at the same time can bolster confidence and clout. I want to acknowledge that, like, yes, often people will utilize their kind of work in order to build like a career or build like the kind of a social currency or popularity around the things that they're doing. And I feel like that's part of the misguided notion of like doing organizing work. If I feel like part of security culture can be anonymity, or you can do things in with pseudonyms. You don't always have to like, you can play with your anonymity. One of the first pictures that I showed was a picture of the Zapatistas, and I feel like for the Zapatistas, they're like a indigenous group in Chiapas who have been fighting against the government that has been destroying their lands and killing their people since the 90s. And because of the infiltration, and because of like knowing that like they could be in immediate danger because of the specific targeting, they have chose to mask up. And there's like the saying, no face no face no case. So I think with different with different direct actions that people are going to want to do in the future, I think there's actual things that you can do to secure your actions, but it doesn't necessarily require it's something more than is just protocol. With the military and certain oppressive institutions like the police, they do have protocol that is called operational security. And though that is it's a good to secure their bases or what have you. We're not trying to replicate those kinds of hierarchical institutions, but also culture is greater than just protocol. Protocol ends at some point, whereas like you have these habits and these customs and principles that you will practice in order to make spaces safer for the people that and part of making spaces safer is, again, back to confronting harm real time in your spaces. Like if you're somebody that is that has caused a lot of harm, I think it's important to be forthcoming about these kinds of harms, but also uh, other ways to help reduce risk and targeting is there's going to be someone that's doing like a more wide array of like talks of conversation on digital security, but that's also part of security culture. So security culture isn't just digitally, it's also in your um, uh, one-on-one interpersonally. If you go to a meeting, it isn't, you know, talking to people about the action or like the illegal activity that you did the other night before. It's more it's acknowledging that they're you don't have to necessarily let other people know what you're doing, and that's part of the ego component again, is that it is, I guess, what's the word, um tempting, I guess, to brag about like something that you've done that is illegal or direct action oriented, but many people who practice security culture, from anarchists to other kinds of activists, indigenous land defense, would say it's not a good tactic to be you know, bragging or revealing even to people who weren't part of an action that you were involved in illegal activity, or because and there are levels of risk to certain activities. So I think we need these kinds of customs in order to stay safe. You can choose to be anonymous, but in terms of like not letting anyone know what your email handle or whatever is, it's not really, it goes beyond just not somebody not knowing specific information. So another part of security culture is assuming that all lines of communication online are pretty much compromised. You shouldn't do planning of direct actions or anything. Like if you plan on even taking the street, uh, it's not a good idea to plan that online. Just always assume that the phone lines or the your emails, or just even, you know, when people are using the radio comms, just always assume that that can be something that that is something that is compromised, and you don't want to necessarily, that's used for communication real time, but not necessarily for planning. Planning should be done in person, on, you know, pen and paper is good. You know, I would keep planning of like risky activities like taking over buildings or occupation, or you know, defense against pipelines, like off of the internet, off of the phones. And if you are writing things down, make sure to burn those kind of documents. And yeah, a lot of people have gotten caught up before in history with you know, the Animal Liberation Front or Earth Liberation Front, if people are familiar, because some people have gotten caught up because of, you know, just caught up. And it's always another good practice to never give up your comrades, never reveal that you have, in, you know, been part of this action, as well as indicating who else was part of a direct action. It's always that's also the another principle of security culture. So yeah, like this other question is who you're doing a direct action with safe. Um, have histories of people. It isn't. That's the other thing about organizing. It's really easy to get wrapped up in like, oh, all these really amazing like new people. Like, um, if you are going to do a more um, covert action that is riskier, that police and the state would deem as illegal or unlawful or what have you, it's always good to, before you're doing those kinds of things, to know your comrades' history, to know that they don't have a history of harm, or like a history of policing, and the person who mentioned how misogynists make great informants, is it brings up the kind of paradox that a lot of us are in. We like, I don't fucks with racists heavy, white supremacists no, but when it comes to sexists and when it comes to misogynists, I feel like people take a little bit more leeway when it comes to somebody's, transphobia, even. That is something that isn't as tackled as, like, say, a rate. Like, it's easy to be like, oh, I'm not working with that person, they're racist. How do we get to these points where we're confronting the harm in our spaces regarding sexism, transphobia, homophobia, because those also can make direct action safe, those can also compromise security culture. Are there any questions so far, or like comments on some of the things I'm ranting about so far? And so for, I guess I'm a little confused about this Zoom screen share, but I can just go to the, oops. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I did want to just give people more chances to speak, and to add. I can like read some of the comments just to respond to it, and maybe that will help start some more dialogue. But I'm sure y'all are probably kind of tired from all of the other workshops. Yeah, security culture to me is what to do to protect each other, survivor centering, keeping people's identities confidential to the point they need to be, minimizing exposure to online surveillance and other state and corporate surveillance. Yes, so again, keeping things offline, because there's there's a clear issue with how people, I guess right now a lot of when it comes to online, people are getting indicated by their tattoos or their sometimes like their eyes, because of the kind of surveillance bureaucracy, and the surveillance state is expanding right now, and it's really important when you're going out, whether it be in the streets, or if you are doing more risky actions, especially now, to cover up those kinds of indicators, because like if everyone is masked up, which they should be now, it's a lot harder to pinpoint exactly who's is doing what, and anonymity can be a very helpful tool in like securing people's identities, as well as like it's often some for myself, I've done work that is, just disaster response or disaster relief, and part of what I've noticed about some people who don't have any practice of security culture is being very open and online about the spaces in which they're providing disaster relief for undocumented people, and that can be very dangerous if you're serving the needs of people who are undocumented and revealing that there are like you can leave yourself open for raids, and that kind of support can be uh, often be detrimental to the people that you're trying to serve. So for myself, and other comrades that I've worked with, we have agreed, that because of our reputations and the work that we do, we might not attach our names to, said mutual aid support, or, the direct action that is like bringing resources to people, because that those connections, like if I were to be like, hey everyone, I'm in this space right now helping these people who are undocumented, what's your name, sir? Caesar is here, undocumented right now. Like if that's the practice that I'm doing, it could compromise the people in the space, including Caesar, and so that's another instance of minimizing that kind of like exposure. Um, is there anyone that has any questions? I think another thing that I want to add about the just the kind of the idea of clout chasing right now is that it has often in so many ways it has often disrupted security, that people I think, I'm sorry, let me scale back. When doing things in ways that test your motivation, like posting online that you fed people today, or posting online saying that you did disaster relief today, or posting online saying that you did whatever humanitarian, direct action oriented, helping people thing, would you still do that if people didn't know? And I think doing things in ways that are anonymous, it's not like, we should be grounded, we should be humble, right, in our practice, as like many of our ancestors like have taught us to, stay grounded. That's important, yes, but it's also an important aspect of, it's also like a kind of tactic too. You don't necessarily want to reveal everything that you're doing, and also it does help to find where your motivation is coming from. So that's what I guess I often worry about some people's motivation online when I see them consistently talking about all the great things that they're doing. I applaud that work, because it is real labor and work. Um, but again, challenging, like, what is the motivation behind that? So yes, so Aiden had said, with a lot of direct action, there is a need such desire to publicize the intent or message behind the action through news media or otherwise. Do you have tips to publicize a message or cause while remaining secure? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways people have tipped off for when the Weather Underground, they broke into yeah, what's the Weather Under broken into the I want to say it's a building that where they were initially trying to find information on animal rights, animal rights information. I believe honestly it was in any case, they stumbled upon the COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, and found that J. Edgar Hoover, for years and years, was utilizing, you know, tax dollars and funding the CIA and the FBI to investigate, and also to clamp down on the actions of Black Power movements, indigenous land defense, and AIM, in American Indian movements. A lot of movements that were, fighting for liberation, fighting for land, fighting for sovereignty, fighting to not be killed by the police, and that breach in security by the Weather Underground when they broke into they got all of this information, and they sent it to uh, a very well known news 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 like a news place, and so after uh they had published these things, they just made sure that they weren't they didn't leave traces of like who they were sending this from. That's harder to do online. There are definitely ways that you can you can create specific you can use like Tor as like a as an online router browser, and then layer your particular security to where it doesn't route back to you, which I yeah, that's something that I wouldn't explicitly know to do, but the person that is talking about web security tomorrow would be able to speak more to that. I'm gonna answer this next question. Two things. I'm wondering what value misdirection has with promoting security culture, and two, how do we help increase security for folks who are already being watched by the state / paramilitary folks? Well, I think that's the loveliness of people power, like the state can only do so much when it comes to targeting people, uh and this is why I think like autonomous decentralized tactics that might even align itself with anonymity are really important, especially right now. More and more people do need to get out there and do need to do the things that need to be done for us all to get free. And so I think with people who are targeted, they know that they're targeted, so that limits their ability to do things, and to it's like if there's a well-known anarchist or a well-known like indigenous land defense water protector, I think they would really have to stew on their reputation, and like I think there's ways and strategies around being targeted, but like targeting comes with the kind of, usually when people are targeted, they know when their security has been compromised. But when it comes to people who are already being watched by the state, that applies to quite a lot of people. Yeah, definitely Black folks, right, especially right now, who are involved in any sort of organizing. But part of security culture is to circumvent the kind of paranoia that comes with like knowing that you're being watched, so you aren't. I think the number one thing about security culture is not, I said before, like not letting other people know that, you know, about specific actions, being not being secretive, but like just not divulging information on specific actions or planning or involvement, because they don't need to know about it, and revealing information to the person even though they're not interested, or even, yeah, if they're not interested or didn't even want to know, uh also compromises security culture, because it could put harm, or that person could also catch a case. And there's a few other uh just terms to consider when starting to organize. Has anyone heard of bad jacketing or snitch jacketing before? Has that ever been give a like a thumbs up in the chat if you have, if anyone's heard of bad jacketing or snitch jacketing. Okay. So bad jacketing is something that, when I mentioned COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program that was created by J. Edgar Hoover to quash a bunch of movements for liberation, undercover police officers and informants would often point the finger and say things like, you know what, I think because of this person's actions, I think that they're actually a police officer or an informant. And it would spread distrust amongst, you know, the Black Panthers or American Indian movement. And it actually had really, really intense, violent, even fatal responses that the state and state agents were utilizing and weaponizing to quash these movements, utilizing these kinds of like, oh, he said, she said, without actual physical documentation or proof that people were in fact state agents. So it was a huge way to misdirect people from eyes on them. If people thought, you know, oh, this person is new and is fishy, they were able to be like, no, you're a police officer, you're a police officer, no, you. And without having actual substantial evidence, and with more and more people spreading that kind of gossip, it was a way to create paranoia and distrust, as well as get other people to even act on their suspicions in ways that were fatal to very many people. Women, different activists have been killed. So when you hear someone talk about snitch jacketing, like don't snitch jacket or don't bad jacket, that brings in all of that history. If somebody is, I see a lot of new people doing it, even people who don't realize or who are unaware of those histories, often are like, that's really fishy, like only a state agent would X, Y, and Z, and what you're giving lip service to is like a tactic that the police and the state and state agents and FBI have actually used against movements. So that's also really, really important, regardless of suspicions and things like that. I think it's good to be secure and to think critically, right, about people's actions, but not in a way that spreads paranoia, if that makes sense. um, is there any more questions? And I apologize for not being as I was kind of like responding to a lot of harm in my immediate communities. I'm currently in Tongva lands, and yeah, I wanted to really center like uh and have resources for people and folks who um just have experienced this harm, this specifically patriarchal harm time and time again, because like we can talk all day about like the state and like how the state is awful and infiltrates and everything like that, but uh we I definitely think that there's ways we have to confront um this kind of like apologism that happens over and over again and cultivates uh these kinds of dynamics that allow for people with clout um, to move through our movement spaces unscathed, and absolves them from accountability, real accountability and harm, you know, acknowledging their behavior and checking it. Um, and that to me is so related to securing your spaces, because I think for me in the last decade of doing this kind of work, I've noticed quite a lot of women and femmes specifically leave spaces because of unchecked and unconfronted harm and abuse. Um, Lyrica says, I was wondering if we could speak on the relation between cancel culture / call out culture and security culture. Also, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would love other people's perspectives on cancel culture, security culture. I think like the criticisms that are coming against cancel culture right now are, I think it's also a kind of misdirect. So the critique is like everyone willy-nilly is like canceled, like you're canceled, that's canceled, it's over, like my mom is canceled, my dad, like it's all like it helps to isolate. It's a that is isolating. And I think there was like a moment in time where I was like that, and I just wouldn't, you know, tell people what my issue was with them. But I think as I realized that, well, there's a pattern that I'm seeing, and that people are socialized by these horrible, oppressive, you know, institutions. And so we will do things that can be awful or harmful. But I think we really need to give opportunity for transformation, yes. But if there's a lack of acknowledgement in harmful behavior, I think people have every right to create those kinds of boundaries, um, boundaries that allow for people to be safer, right? To be secure, to not have to be around abusers or people who have perpetuated abuse, and that is also intrinsically linked to security culture, because you're yeah, you're just acknowledging the safety of the people that you're working with. So like, yeah, is who the people I'm working with safe if I know that there is like a person that is like a serial, like, I don't want to trigger anyone, serial abuser, right? Or they have like committed harms against multiple people. If I know that that is the case, which was the case for the person that I was going to do this workshop with. But if I know that's the case, then I think it's kind of my responsibility to at least let people know, or at least have a conversation with this person and let them know that, like, like you need to address this in a way that like makes people secure, and that won't later then upon people finding out about your history of abuse and harms, than them just leaving the space altogether because they were like, I thought that person was trusted, I didn't know they had that history. And like, it's a very nuanced, this is part of like the abolitionist kind of work and approach. It's like being willing to see that people are more than just the kind of harms that they cause, but making way for that to be addressed, and for people who are survivors to then to then be able to scale back when they want, or to be listened to and heard. I have a lot of things to say about people who have critiques about call out culture, because in my day, a lot, I'm calling out people literally right now. Like, um, the critiques that people have against call out culture are usually people who haven't been in a situation where they didn't have anything else. They had no other recourse but to call out a person who had been being abusive or harmful. So in so many of my instances of where I called somebody out, I have had time and again, like consistent conversations, holding space with them, holding space for them often. And if a person is unwilling to see that they did harm, or they caused someone great, like, like just trauma, if they're not willing to see that, then I think sanctions should be made. And I think there needs to be boundary making and guidelines around, well, is this person a safe person or a secure person to be around? Because if they're not, then then you then compromise not only an action or a space or a camp. There's so many things that can be compromised because of unchecked misogyny, unchecked racism. And I think like what calling out is like that kind of last resort. And yes, I have definitely seen people calling people out willy-nilly without having that conversation, and that, I think that's unfair. And like, I think people should get a chance to like understand what they did was wrong without being humiliated, with giving them a chance to, but the kind of call outs that we're kind of seeing right now is like a call out of like years of harm, or people who are willing to rationalize their behavior. So from AK, I think it's important to look to for the people who gain personal power in the group by frequently pushing for other people to get canceled. Maybe they're just the one who always finds out about bad behavior, maybe because they're the only one in the group affected by sexism, but sometimes there's something else going on that's deeply disruptive to the group. It's something that needs to be considered carefully and thoughtfully. Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, I guess I want to give the floor to people if they want to. I've been talking a lot. But like, if any people want to talk to just some of the things that came to mind with this relationship between like security culture or like harm people have done, I would like to know, just because it's very rampant. It seems like it's a song that never ends, and it's um I think if we are thinking about abolition of prisons and police, this is something that is really, really important. And I always push like studying transformative justice is definitely related to making your communities or your pods or what have you secure. But I wanted to ask if like anyone had anything to add before if we end this in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, yeah, like clout, I think that's a very, very big thing. It's very deep. Um, yeah, I just feel like there could be a whole conversation on clout, to be honest. I think a big part of like calling out is like what you mentioned, that like a lot of the times um, there's other resources or paths that are used to hold people accountable, and then they end up not holding themselves accountable, and so it's or not wanting to be held accountable, which is why they're called out. I think also a part of the calling out is that like a lot of the times the first resources are given to the perpetrators instead of the victims, or it's like first the go-to is to go to like the abusers and help allocate like and mitigate that harm and not create healing processes. And I think it's also like a big part of call out culture is rooted in like black feminism, like anti-capitalist black feminism, and that like there needs to be different avenues of abolition. That's the transformative justice and RJ circles, but it's also like lane guarding and like protecting folks. That's definitely a big part of abolition. That like it's about making like preventative care, and like I think a lot of people don't realize that restorative justice, most of those practices are preventative care, and that's why like TJ was created to create like response networks, but also that's for people who want to hold themselves accountable. Like that isn't coercion. So when there isn't coercion, that's the whole point of call out. So it's like if they don't even want to partake in like mitigating harm, then like why are we like that's the whole point of the community, is to like mitigate harm. So I think it's like all of these pieces are essential, from like the RJ spectrum all the way down to like the call out culture.
Anyone else?
I can go. I think just something I've seen like being on the internet is that like in the past 2 years, especially with younger folks, it's like as influencers have gotten really big, and how like activism is like this like mainstream thing. And I feel like the word activist is like thrown around really like willy-nilly and not understanding. Like I'm not trying to like do like a privilege Olympics, or like I do this, and like you were saying, like displaying it all. I think there's a social change ecosystem, and of course everyone has their role in it, and no one's role is more important. But I think just people have seen like activism as like a way to build their own personal brand, and you see like folks who get really big on the internet as quote unquote activists end up getting like partnerships and like stuff that feeds more into capitalism. And I think there's a blurred line between like having a job and sustaining yourself, which is something we all have to do. We all have to eat, we all have to pay our rent, and that's valid. And we all can critique a system that we're in, you know, because that's how we survive. But I think also just it just feels kind of ingenuine to me that folks are calling themselves activists, when I know like folks who came before us, folks around the world, are putting their lives on the line for this. And like the previous speaker had said, a lot of it is just for clout and not really staying true to the intentions. And if it means like you're using Instagram as a way to do your activism and you're true to it and it's what feels good for you, by all means do it. But I think having those conversations and not using that term so loosely and kind of preserving the integrity of it, because I think it's just gotten kind of like super broad, and like everyone is like calling themselves this, and it just feels just weird to me, in my opinion, you know.
I agree. I agree 1,000%. Thank you for saying all of that. Um, I think I don't I think like what you just said, it like that rings true to me so much that I don't call myself an activist. I actually challenge. I hope to challenge those like notions by acknowledging that like well, right now with like activism's relationship to nonprofits and how nonprofits are just an extension of the state, and NGOs are also just an extension of the state. That isn't, you know, the kind of, we're trying to think beyond the state, beyond the prisons, beyond having a job that is needed, that you're paid for. What does that mean if you have a job that's like supposed to end world hunger or whatever? Like the fact that you're getting paid to end world hunger, you need world hunger to exist to facilitate you having this job. So some structurally what that looks like is prolonging the issue, just like how structurally what it looks like for the state to maintain its authority, its organized authority, means that it creates the solutions for us to create small scale reforms and things that don't really dismantle the state necessarily. Like, and I see the state as like in relationship as almost like an analogy again to an abusive partner that we need to actually break up with and phase out and render irrelevant to us, because it's something that creates problems in order to maintain its relationship with us. Yeah, so I guess it's 5:01, and I don't want people to miss out on the thing that's happening on Instagram Live or on IG Live on the Uplift page, right? Am I right about that? Am I like, I think there's a thing happening that I want people to, you know, be able to go to. So I just really appreciate everyone's words. If you didn't or listening to me, and I apologize again for the lack of, I guess, readiness because of the person revealing themselves that they, you know, I didn't cancel this person, by the way. I'm willing to acknowledge that, like, you know, that they are changing. They have acknowledged some bits and pieces, but I think because they didn't hold themselves accountable to the person, the two other women that have been harmed by them, that's when I was like, I can't do this with you. If those women saw me in collaboration with you and they knew me or whatever, like, because I have social currency or whatever and clout online, I would feel really terrible if like they saw that and they saw that as like a, just another facet of like, you know, their abusive person that harmed them is being uplifted. And like, I've experienced that, a lot of us have. So thank you again to all the people who were on this this call, and I really appreciate everyone for doing all the things. Great job, everybody, and good luck the rest of this weekend. I'll probably see you in some of these online conversations, but yeah.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a good one. Thank you, Etsy.
Thank you. Bye.